I opened your door. Deal with it!
You threatened my family's safety.
The midnight silence shattered when the back door clicked open. My heart froze. You had no right, I yelled, but Linda Carmichael, the board chair, smirked like she owned the place. It's community safety, she said, voice cold and dismissive. Your daughter's alarm was triggered. We had to check. I didn't flinch. You broke in. That's illegal. The clipboard queen lifted her chin, proud and untouchable. You think rules don't apply here? I clenched my fists, the cold night air biting at my skin. I'm the one who installed this system. I wrote the firmware. Every sensor, every lock, every alarm, it all reports back to me. You crossed a line no HOA should touch. Her eyes flickered for a moment. Was it surprise? Then she masked it with arrogance. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, subscribe and get ready. This fight's about to become a masterclass in reclaiming your home and your peace. I'm Michael Harper, security engineer by trade, father by heart, and a man who knows how to make a digital fortress out of a simple home. Linda Carmichael, the tyrant in heels, has forgotten one thing. She doesn't own my family's safety. This isn't just about a door or an alarm. It's about trust, shattered by a woman who thinks authority means breaking in at midnight. My daughter, just 9 years old, was alone when the alarm screamed through the quiet house. She didn't just hear a warning, she felt invasion, terror. Her small hands trembled as she called out for me, and I wasn't there. The only thing I could do was race through the dark streets, heart pounding, knowing that this breach wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated violation by the enforcer in crimson, who hides behind HOA rules to bully families like mine. The back door lock, my family's first line of defense, was supposed to keep us safe. Instead, it became a symbol of how far the clipboard queen would go to control us. The alarm panel still glowed red, a cruel reminder of what she'd done. Linda Carmichael claims she acted for safety, but she didn't knock, didn't call, didn't warn, just forced her way in on her own terms. The tyrant in heels thinks she's above the law, but she doesn't know who she's dealing with. The cold sting in my gut was nothing compared to the weight of betrayal. I wasn't just angry, I was furious, not for myself, but for my daughter who now associates home with fear. I looked down at her wide eyes, the night's terror still etched on her face, and promised myself I'd stop this madness. This wasn't going to be a simple complaint or a quiet word behind closed doors. It was a battle for our sanctuary, our privacy, and our right to feel safe in our own home. Linda Carmichael's midnight intrusion lit a fire I won't let die. This community, my family, and every homeowner deserve protection from this kind of overreach. Where are you watching from right now? Have you ever felt that sickening moment when your home stops feeling like yours? Because this story is more than just mine. It's a warning and a call to action for anyone who's ever been pushed too far. Tonight, I'll start the fight to take back what the clipboard queen tried to steal, one proof point at a time. Linda Carmichael didn't stop at midnight trespassing. No, the board chair turned the screws tighter every day. By morning, neighbors were already whispering about another safety inspection scheduled for the week. No notice, no consent, just the clipboard queen's word as law. The tyrant in heels was flexing power, and everyone felt it. I heard about the new rules. She pushed through the HOA board, using her charm and menace in equal measure. Suddenly, any security system that wasn't approved by her had to be disabled. That included my daughter's alarm, our safeguard against the kind of violation she was committing. The enforcer in crimson masked it as community welfare, but I saw through the veil. It was control, pure and simple. Linda Carmichael wanted absolute authority, and she was willing to trample anyone who stood in her way, even families like mine. I watched as my neighbors' faces tightened with fear. The elderly couple down the street reluctantly lowered their shutters earlier, worried their own alarms might betray them. Single parents whispered about keeping their children indoors, afraid of what the clipboard queen might authorize next. Linda Carmichael's latest move was cruel, a letter sent to every homeowner warning that unauthorized security measures would lead to hefty fines, possibly even eviction. It was thinly veiled intimidation. The tyrant in heels wanted submission, and she wanted it fast. I knew this wasn't just about me. It was about every family in the neighborhood living under the thumb of a board chair who thought she was above reproach. The enforcer in crimson had weaponized fear to keep control. I couldn't let this stand, but to fight the clipboard queen, I had to understand her playbook. She relied on the community's silence, on the fear that anyone who spoke up would be next to feel the full force of her wrath. I talked to neighbors quietly, piecing together the extent of her reach. People were scared. Scared to speak at meetings, scared to question the tyrant in heels, scared to push back. Some had already paid fines they didn't owe. Others had removed security devices on her demand. I knew I needed proof, something that showed the board chair was not just overstepping, but breaking the law. The community's heart was breaking beneath her iron fist, but the symbolic battleground was clear. The back door lock, our family's barrier against intrusion, was where it all began. Linda Carmichael's midnight invasion wasn't a one-off mistake. It was a statement, a warning to everyone that her word was final. I remembered my training as a security engineer, my years designing systems that stood against hackers and intruders. This wasn't just a technical problem, it was a psychological siege. The clipboard queen's actions had fractured trust, and trust was the foundation of any neighborhood. Without it, this gated community was just a cage, and Linda Carmichael held the key. I began documenting everything, not with papers, but with patterns. Each inspection, each rule change, every intimidating letter, it formed a mosaic of abuse. Even more chilling was the quiet complicity of some board members. Mark Delaney, the HOA treasurer, kept his distance, nodding along but never stepping up. He looked torn, caught between loyalty and conscience. The enforcer in crimson had allies, but her grip was slipping. Fear only lasts so long before resistance bubbles under the surface. Every day I felt the weight of responsibility more. This wasn't just my family anymore. It was the whole community. Linda Carmichael's reign was coming to an end. I steeled myself for what was next. The clipboard queen had declared war, but I was ready to fight back, with facts, with evidence, and with the quiet strength of every homeowner who refused to be bullied. The tyrant in heels didn't realize the storm she'd unleashed. Mark Delaney stood just outside my door, shifting his weight awkwardly from one foot to the other. The HOA treasurer, quiet, conflicted, the reluctant ally I hadn't expected to find so close. He glanced nervously over his shoulder, as if the clipboard queen might materialize from the shadows at any moment. I don't know if I should be here, he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. I fixed him with a steady gaze. Mark, you're not alone in this, but we need to know what's really happening behind the board chair's closed doors. He swallowed hard, rubbing his palms on his jeans. Linda, she's been pushing things too far. The midnight lock, the letters, it's all spiraling out of control. But she's ruthless. You know that. The enforcer in crimson wasn't just ruthless. She was calculating. The clipboard queen had cornered the neighborhood with fear, and Mark was trapped in the middle, trying not to be crushed. I get it, I said quietly, but hiding won't protect you or anyone else. Mark's eyes flicked to the street, scanning for signs of surveillance or someone watching. I've got numbers, transactions, payments she's authorized. Some don't add up. The tyrant in heels had a financial web, loopholes and shadow deals designed to silence dissent and line pockets. Mark was the key to unraveling it. But if she finds out I'm talking, his voice cracked with worry. She'll make me pay. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You won't be alone. I'm not just some homeowner. You remember my background, right? Security systems, engineering. I know how to protect myself, and I'll help protect you. Mark hesitated, torn between fear and a flicker of hope. The clipboard queen's grip was strong, but cracks were showing. You're the only one who can help us, I said. Without your proof, this stays in her hands. He exhaled sharply, tension easing just a little. I want to do the right thing, for the neighborhood, for my family, but I'm scared. Fear was the tyrant in heels' strongest weapon. It kept people silent, compliant, broken. But Mark's confession was the first step toward breaking the spell. Outside, the late afternoon sun dipped behind the houses, casting long shadows over the community entrance. The symbolic gate Linda Carmichael controlled with an iron fist. I pictured the midnight break-in again, the way she'd crossed the line, stepping into our private space without permission. That wasn't authority, it was theft, violation. Mark looked at me with fresh determination, the conflicted witness now leaning toward courage. If you help me gather everything, I can expose her, he said quietly. Show the board chair isn't just a bully. She's breaking laws. The clipboard queen's empire depended on secrecy and silence. Mark's willingness to stand up was the first crack in her fortress. I'll start compiling the evidence you need, I promised. We'll take this all the way, no matter how deep it goes. The enforcer in crimson had no idea the tide was turning. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. The community was counting on more than just fear. They needed proof. Mark's internal struggle mirrored the neighborhood's fight. Caught between what was easy and what was right, he glanced over his shoulder again, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down. We have to be careful, he warned. Linda doesn't play fair. The clipboard queen's reign thrived on intimidation, but the truth had a way of rising. Together, I said, we'll bring it to light. The next morning, the community center felt different, charged, tense. Word had spread quietly about Mark Delaney's wavering loyalty, and it seemed the clipboard queen had sensed it too. Linda Carmichael wasn't one to tolerate betrayal, not from inside her own board. The enforcer in crimson was preparing her next move, and I was certain it would be ruthless. I stood outside the community center's glass doors, the late sun reflecting off the polished surface, a mirror to the fierce battle underway inside. This place, once a gathering spot for neighbors, had become the tyrant in Heel's courtroom, a stage for public shaming and twisted authority. As I entered, I caught sight of her. The board chair was already holding court, clipboard in hand, issuing fresh demands and threats like a general marshalling troops. Everyone needs to understand, she said, voice sharp and controlled, that rules are not suggestions. Compliance isn't optional. Her gaze swept over the assembled homeowners like a hawk, locking eyes with anyone daring to question her. Linda Carmichael thrived on that power, the chilling control she wielded like a weapon. My presence didn't go unnoticed. The tyrant in heels fixed me with a cold stare, lips curling in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Aaron, she said with feigned sweetness, I hope you're not here to stir more trouble. This community needs order, not chaos. Order? I echoed, voice steady. You call breaking into someone's home at midnight order? You call threatening families compliance? The clipboard queen's smile tightened. I'm enforcing the rules we all agreed on. You're the one resisting. I met her gaze evenly. Not when your rules violate privacy and safety. Around us murmurs grew. Some homeowners shifted uneasily, others exchanged glances, hope flickering beneath their fear. The enforcer in crimson wasn't invincible. Linda Carmichael's tone dropped, colder now. You think you're above the community's standards? That your profession or background gives you special privileges? I'm saying your standards are unlawful, I replied. I'm here to protect my family and everyone else you're terrorizing. The tyrant in heels laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You're bluffing. Without proof, you're just a disgruntled neighbor. That was where Mark Delaney's confession would make all the difference. But for now, this was a war of wills. Linda's eyes flicked briefly to the back, signaling someone. Moments later, one of her enforcers, a tall, stern woman in uniform, approached, holding a freshly printed notice. The clipboard queen took it and waved it in the air like a gavel. This is a formal warning, she announced, voice echoing through the hall. Immediate removal of unauthorized alarm systems, or face fines and legal action. My jaw clenched. The midnight break-in had triggered the alarm. My daughter's quick reflexes saved her from danger, but the HOA's response was to punish us further. The board chair's tyranny had no bounds. I stepped forward, voice rising. You're targeting families for protecting themselves. This isn't enforcement, it's intimidation. Linda Carmichael's smile returned, cruel and confident. If you don't comply, you'll learn how serious we are. A murmur rippled through the crowd, fear mixed with defiance. As the meeting adjourned, I caught Mark's eye near the back. His hesitation was still there, but so was a new resolve. The clipboard queen's threats weren't just words. They were weapons aimed straight at the heart of the neighborhood's safety. Outside, I felt the weight of what lay ahead. The enforcer in crimson would escalate, no doubt. But now, with Mark's shaky allegiance and my own expertise, I had a foothold. Linda Carmichael's iron grip was slipping. This community deserved better. The symbolic back door, the one she'd opened in the dead of night, was now a battleground, a reminder of how far the board chair would go to control. But it was also a symbol of resistance. The tyrant in heels thought she was untouchable. She was about to find out she wasn't. Late that afternoon, I found myself at the edge of the neighborhood's maintenance yard. The clipboard queen had made one critical mistake. She underestimated what I could do with a little technical know-how and determination. Linda Carmichael's ironclad facade was cracking, and I intended to pry it open. The enforcer in crimson had authorized a series of security upgrades and alarm system mandates across the community, orders issued with little regard for legality or privacy. My expertise in home security systems wasn't just a hobby, it was a tool I now wielded with purpose. I wasn't just fighting back emotionally, I was gathering proof, hard evidence that could expose her unlawful overreach. Standing beneath the stark fluorescent lights of the dimly lit workshop, I carefully examined the alarm panel I'd borrowed from a sympathetic neighbor's house. The system Linda Carmichael had demanded be installed wasn't compliant with state regulations. Worse, it allowed for invasive surveillance and remote entry overrides that no homeowner had consented to. The clipboard queen might have thought she was protecting the community, but she'd turned it into a cage. As I worked, my phone buzzed quietly. Mark Delaney. His conflicted voice came through, hesitant but resolute. Aaron, there's something you need to know about the alarm upgrades. The contracts aren't what they seem. A glimmer of hope. Linda Carmichael's financial backing for these so-called security measures came from a shell company with ties that were murky at best. Mark's admission was the key to unraveling the board chair's facade of legitimacy. I ended the call, heart pounding. The tyrant in heels had overstepped in ways that could land her, and those complicit, in serious legal trouble. But that wasn't all. I had a plan to turn her own weapons against her. I'd spent years learning the ins and outs of compliance traps, ways to exploit overzealous regulations so thoroughly they backfire on their enforcers. The enforcer in crimson had wielded fear and intimidation for too long. It was time for her to face the consequences. My mind raced with possibilities as I tested each function of the alarm panel. If I could prove that the devices could be triggered falsely or manipulated remotely, I could force Linda Carmichael into a corner, and the community would rally behind us. Late into the night, I connected with a trusted technician friend outside the neighborhood, someone with experience in federal compliance codes. Together, we dissected the HOA's security protocols, uncovering a tangled web of unauthorized access points and illegal monitoring capabilities. It was clear the board chair had willfully ignored homeowners' rights to privacy. The clipboard queen's iron grip extended beyond mere rules. It was a violation of trust and law. As I pieced together this evidence, I thought about Elena and our daughter. The alarm she triggered at midnight wasn't just a signal of intrusion. It was a symbol of resistance against the tyrant in heels, and it was my job to make sure that resistance had teeth. The next day, I confronted Linda Carmichael face-to-face near the community mailbox, her posture as rigid and cold as ever. The clipboard queen looked ready to dismiss me again, but this time, I wasn't backing down. "I know what you're doing with those alarm systems," I said quietly, meeting the enforcer in crimson's eyes. "It's illegal. You've crossed a line." Her lips curled into a tight smile. "I'm simply enforcing community standards," she replied. "If you want to challenge me, be my guest." But the calm I held was not weakness. I had the leverage now, the knowledge, the allies, the mounting evidence. The tyrant in heels couldn't intimidate me anymore. "I'm not bluffing, Linda," I said firmly. "I'm preparing to take this higher. If you don't back down, I'll make sure outside authorities get involved." Her eyes flashed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty beneath her steely mask. Walking away, I felt the first real taste of momentum. The clipboard queen was no longer untouchable. My fight was no longer just personal. It was for the entire community, and Linda Carmichael's reign of fear was about to meet its match. The next morning, the neighborhood felt heavier, like the air itself was thick with anticipation. I stood outside the community center, feeling the sting of the early winter chill, knowing the clipboard queen's shadow loomed over every corner. Linda Carmichael had doubled down overnight. The tyrant in heels was no longer subtle, she was brazen. Her latest move was audacious, sending unauthorized patrols through our streets, armed with the very alarm systems she forced on us. Elena and our daughter had barely slept since the midnight intrusion, and now the neighborhood was on edge, with fear spreading like wildfire. Inside the community center's stark conference room, the enforcer in crimson sat smugly at the head of the table, flanked by her loyalists. I caught her eyes, cold, calculating, confident. The board chair believed she had this all sewn up, but I was ready. Today wasn't just about confrontation, it was about stakes. Linda Carmichael had crossed a boundary no one should breach, and the consequences would be real and personal. I'd spent the last 48 hours consulting with legal experts and security professionals, aligning my next move with ironclad facts. This wasn't a game anymore. It was a battle for our family's safety and dignity. My phone buzzed quietly in my pocket. Mark Delaney's message lit the screen. "I can help. Meet me tonight." That conflicted ally was my lifeline. Someone inside the belly of the beast, struggling against the clipboard queen's tightening grip. During the meeting, Linda Carmichael laid out her plans for new compliance audits, threatening fines and sanctions that sounded like empty words but carried real weight for many neighbors. The tyrant in heels had perfected the art of intimidation, weaponizing the very trust she'd been given. When my turn came, I stood firm, voice steady but edged with quiet fury. These audits aren't just unfair, they're illegal. You have no authority to enter homes without consent. You're violating state laws. The enforcer in crimson smirked. "We're protecting the community's interests." "By breaking the law?" I countered. "By terrorizing families?" Her gaze sharpened, but I sensed the first cracks in the board chair's armor. The clipboard queen was rattled, just enough. Later, under the flickering streetlights, I met Mark at a secluded corner of the neighborhood park. His hands trembled as he handed me a USB drive. "I couldn't stand by anymore," he whispered. "Linda's been falsifying records, covering up complaints. She's made this personal." That night, with Elena asleep beside me, I pored over the files, emails, recordings, and surveillance footage showing the board chair's covert operations. Linda Carmichael wasn't just abusing power, she was building a fortress of lies. The weight of it hit me hard. This wasn't just about alarms or broken locks, it was about betrayal. As dawn crept through the blinds, I called my lawyer. "We're ready to escalate. This ends now." But Linda Carmichael was already moving. The next day, notices appeared on doors. Summons to a special HOA meeting, a public forum where the board chair planned to defend her actions. The clipboard queen wanted a showdown, and I would give her one. Every step I took was measured. I coordinated with neighbors who'd suffered under the enforcer in Crimson's regime, gathering their stories, their fears, their courage. Our community was no longer divided by fear, it was uniting in outrage. That night, as I stood watch outside our home, the alarm system hummed softly. The same system Linda Carmichael had forced on us, but now it was our shield. I felt a surge of resolve. The tyrant in heels might control the boardroom, but she couldn't control the truth. An outside authority was coming. Mark Delaney's hesitation was clear the moment I saw him at the edge of the community garden. His shoulders slumped, eyes darting nervously between the empty benches and the quiet houses lining the street. The conflicted ally was visibly torn, like a man caught between loyalty and conscience. The clipboard queen had him wrapped tight, but the weight of what he was about to do hung heavy in the air. "I can't keep this bottled up anymore," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Linda Carmichael, the board chair. She's gone too far. The enforcer in crimson isn't just enforcing rules. She's weaponizing fear." I nodded, sensing the tension rising like a storm about to break. "You're doing the right thing, Mark. What do you have for me?" He pulled a folded envelope from his coat pocket, hands shaking as he passed it over. Inside were emails, recordings, and photos, proof of the tyrant in heels, orchestrating covert patrols, breaking into homes without permission, and tampering with alarm systems. The clipboard queen's reign was far darker than anyone suspected. "It's worse than we thought," Mark confessed, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting the enforcer in crimson to materialize. "She's covering her tracks, manipulating neighbors, silencing dissent. But this could bring her down." The gravity of the moment settled over us. This wasn't just a boardroom dispute anymore. It was a battle for the soul of our community. The enforcer in crimson had painted herself as a protector, but beneath that crimson blazer was a woman willing to destroy anyone who stood in her way. As Mark spoke, I felt a surge of determination. We had the leverage we needed to expose Linda Carmichael, the tyrant in heels who'd invaded our lives and shattered our peace. But the path ahead was dangerous. The board chair wouldn't go down without a fight. "Are you ready for what comes next?" I asked quietly. Mark swallowed hard. "I'm in, but we have to be careful. The clipboard queen's reach is long." That night, I sat with Elena and our daughter in the living room, the glow of the city lights filtering through the curtains. My mind raced with plans and possibilities. The community needed to see the truth, but it had to be undeniable, documented, witnessed, undeniable. The next morning, I arranged a discreet meeting with the city's code enforcement officer, someone I'd met during my work as a structural engineer. We reviewed the evidence Mark had provided, the videos showing Linda Carmichael's midnight patrols and unauthorized entries. The enforcer in crimson's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. "Looks like we've got a serious violation here," the officer said, eyes narrowing at the footage. "This isn't just a petty HOA dispute. These are trespassing and harassment. We'll open an investigation." The clipboard queen wouldn't see this coming. As the days passed, word spread quietly among neighbors. The tyrant in heels supporters began to falter as more homeowners shared their own stories of intimidation and fear. Linda Carmichael's grip weakened under the mounting pressure, but she fought back with venom. The board chair sent out threatening letters, warning of legal action against anyone who slandered the HOA or its leaders. The clipboard queen's voice echoed in emails and flyers, sharp, cold, relentless. I knew the final confrontation was near. One evening, as I prepared evidence for the upcoming community meeting, my phone buzzed with a message from Mark. "Linda's planning a surprise inspection tomorrow. Be ready." The enforcer in crimson was desperate, trying to catch us off guard. But we were ready. That night, as I watched over Elena and our daughter, the alarm system triggered briefly, a false alert, but a reminder of the stakes. The clipboard queen had pushed us into a corner, but I wasn't backing down. Our community was rallying, fueled by the conflicted witness who'd stepped into the light and the truth we now held. Linda Carmichael's tyranny was unraveling. The board chair had awakened a resistance she never expected, and the battle for our neighborhood's future was just beginning. The tension in the neighborhood was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every corner I turned, I felt eyes watching, whispers following me like shadows. Linda Carmichael, the clipboard queen, had stepped up her game, tightening her grip like the tyrant in heels she was. But now, armed with Mark's confession and the city inspector's backing, I was no longer just reacting. I was ready to act. In the dim light of my garage, I laid out the evidence, connecting the dots with a precision born from years of engineering discipline. The enforcer in crimson thought she could intimidate an entire community into silence, but she hadn't counted on me turning her own tactics against her. Each photo, each recording was a piece of the puzzle, a pattern of abuse, trespassing, and deception. I sent a careful message to the neighbors who had started whispering about the board chair's midnight raids and unauthorized entries. The clipboard queen's tyranny thrived on fear, but fear needed fuel. I wanted to starve it. We needed to organize, to mobilize, and to build undeniable momentum. Over the next few days, I held informal meetings at local cafes and parks, gathering neighbors who were quietly seething under Linda Carmichael's rule. The enforcer in crimson's arrogance was her weakness. She'd underestimated the community's will to fight back. At one gathering, Mrs. Jacobs, a woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and a fiercer spirit, shared her story about the tyrant in heels threatening her over a simple garden decoration. Another neighbor revealed how the clipboard queen had shut down their children's play area without warning. The outrage was palpable. I could see it then, a groundswell of resistance forming beneath the surface. The board chair's attempts to suppress dissent were backfiring spectacularly. The enforcer in crimson was losing control, and the community was waking up. Linda Carmichael sent out another round of threatening letters, but they fell on deaf ears. The clipboard queen's once loyal allies began to falter, their confidence shaken by the growing chorus of voices demanding change. I worked closely with the city inspector, arranging official walkthroughs to document the HOA's illegal actions. The enforcer and Crimson's carefully hidden violations were becoming public record. This was the kind of professional expertise that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. Every day, I felt the stakes rising. Elena and our daughter lived under the same roof as the clipboard queen's shadow. Our home, the very sanctuary she had violated, became the symbol of the fight for justice. The tyrant in heels tried one last desperate move, a surprise inspection at dawn, meant to catch us unprepared and to intimidate those who dared resist. But we had anticipated this, coordinating with neighbors and the city inspector to ensure a professional presence. As the sun crept over the horizon, Linda Carmichael arrived in her usual sharp suit, flanked by a handful of board members and security personnel. The enforcer in Crimson's eyes flashed with calculated menace, but I met her gaze unflinchingly. This wasn't just about a backdoor lock or a triggered alarm anymore. It was about reclaiming our neighborhood from a woman who wielded power like a weapon. The clipboard queen had no idea how many had been quietly watching, recording, and preparing to expose her. The city inspector's official report was clear and damning. Multiple violations, unlawful entries, and harassment documented beyond any doubt. Linda Carmichael's reign was crumbling under the weight of facts and community solidarity. But the board chair wasn't finished. She lashed out verbally, accusing us of defamation and conspiracy. The enforcer in Crimson's voice cut through the morning air, sharp and threatening, but it only served to highlight her desperation. Neighbors stepped forward, sharing their stories openly for the first time. The clipboard queen's supporters dwindled, their faces paling as the truth took center stage. By midday, the community gathering had transformed into a small rally, voices rising in unison against Linda Carmichael's tyranny. The tyrant in heels who thought she ruled with an iron fist found herself isolated, exposed, and powerless. As the crowd dispersed, I stood with Elena and our daughter, watching the sun climb higher. The fight wasn't over, but the momentum had shifted. The board chair's grip had loosened, and a new chapter for our neighborhood was beginning. We were no longer victims of fear. We were architects of change. The days after the rally were charged with a new energy, a fierce urgency that pulsed through our community like electricity. Linda Carmichael, the clipboard queen, was no longer the untouchable enforcer in Crimson. The board chair's facade was cracking, but she wasn't ready to surrender her throne. The tyrant in heels was plotting her next move, and I was determined to be one step ahead. At my workshop, surrounded by blueprints and tools, I mapped out a plan that leaned into my professional expertise. I wasn't just fighting back with words. I was constructing a counterattack rooted in the very systems Linda Carmichael had tried to control. Every unauthorized lockpick, every midnight intrusion would be met with a strategic response. I began installing a network of discrete security cameras and sensors around our property, especially focused on the back door, the very gateway the clipboard queen had exploited. The enforcer in Crimson's reckless midnight visits would be captured in undeniable detail. This was more than protection. It was evidence, a tangible shield against further abuse. Meanwhile, I coordinated with the city inspector to schedule surprise visits to other community properties, ensuring that Linda Carmichael's pattern of violations wouldn't be limited to our home. The board chair had isolated herself, but her actions rippled outward. It was time to expose the full scope of her control. The tyrant in heels wasn't silent. Late one evening, I caught a glimpse of her moving suspiciously near the neighborhood security office. Her sharp silhouette under the street lamp was a stark reminder that this battle was far from over. I shared these observations with Mark, the conflicted witness whose fear was now slowly turning to resolve. The clipboard queen had leaned on his silence for too long. Now, with cameras rolling and neighbors rallying, he was beginning to see the power of standing with us. One morning, as I reviewed the latest footage, a sudden alert sounded. The backdoor sensor had been triggered, again. My heart pounded as I raced outside, only to find the neighborhood security guard investigating. No sign of forced entry, but the tension was unmistakable. The enforcer in Crimson's presence was still felt, even if she wasn't visible. I made a point to confront Linda Carmichael directly at the next board meeting. The clipboard queen tried to dismiss my concerns, but I was armed with facts and recordings that couldn't be ignored. Her smug smile faltered when I projected the footage on the community's big screen. Her midnight prowling caught in crystal clarity. The tyrant in heels snapped, accusing me of harassment and trying to undermine the board. But the community was watching now, and her words fell flat. I saw neighbors exchanging glances, their loyalty shifting away from the board chair. Over the following weeks, I worked with local legal experts to ensure our actions stayed within the boundaries of HOA and city laws. This wasn't a personal vendetta. It was a fight for justice rooted in facts and fairness. The clipboard queen's arbitrary rules had no place here. Mark, visibly changed, began to speak out more openly. His hesitation replaced by conviction, he shared private board discussions that revealed the enforcer in Crimson's deliberate attempts to bypass regulations. His confession was a turning point, proof from within the system itself. Linda Carmichael responded by tightening security protocols, locking down meeting minutes, and limiting access to community resources. The board chair was desperate, trying to maintain control through isolation and secrecy. But the momentum we built was unstoppable. With support growing, I organized a community vote to recall the clipboard queen. Flyers were distributed, meetings held, voices raised. The tyrant in heels had sparked a revolution, and now she was facing the consequences. The day of the vote arrived, heavy with anticipation. Neighbors filed into the community center, their faces set with determination. Linda Carmichael entered, poised but visibly tense. The enforcer in crimson was now the defendant in a public trial of character and leadership. When the votes were counted, the result was decisive. The board chair was removed, her reign ended by the very community she sought to control. Cheers erupted, relief washing over the crowd like a cleansing storm. As the clipboard queen packed up her things, I felt a deep sense of victory, not just for my family, but for every neighbor who had dared to stand up. The tyrant in heels was gone, but the lessons remained. Our neighborhood was no longer a place of fear, but one of unity and resilience. We had reclaimed our home, proving that even the most entrenched power could fall when faced with truth and solidarity. The quiet before the storm stretched thin, taut with the promise of a showdown that would shake the very core of our community. Linda Carmichael, the clipboard queen, knew the walls were closing in. The enforcer in crimson had lost her grip, but she still wielded enough influence to make the final moments dangerous. The board chair was cornered, desperate to rewrite the narrative before the public confrontation. I spent the morning preparing, reviewing every piece of evidence meticulously, the midnight footage, the security logs, Mark's confession. The tyrant in heels had underestimated how far I'd go. My background as a cybersecurity specialist gave me an edge. Every detail was cross-checked, every vulnerability accounted for. This wasn't just about catching Linda Carmichael in the act. It was about dismantling her whole operation. At the community center, chairs were arranged in tight rows, faces familiar and anxious filling the room. The air was thick with anticipation. The clipboard queen arrived last, her crimson jacket sharp against the dull beige walls. She scanned the room with a practiced gaze, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips, a facade of control that cracked under the weight of dozens of watchful eyes. I started the presentation without hesitation. The enforcer in crimson's midnight trespasses flashed on the big screen, crystal clear in high definition. The room shifted, murmurs rose, disbelief mingled with anger. Linda Carmichael's expression hardened, the tyrant in heels struggling to maintain composure. I called out specific violations, each timestamp and sensor trigger highlighted like a ticking bomb. The clipboard queen's influence was no longer invisible. It was undeniable. Neighbors leaned forward, their protective instincts ignited. This was no longer about property lines. It was about safety, respect, and trust. The board chair tried to interject, accusing me of fabricating evidence and stirring unrest. Her voice was sharp, but the room was no longer hers to command. Mark Delaney stepped forward, his eyes steady. The conflicted ally, once hesitant, now stood firmly beside truth. He corroborated the timeline, confirming the board chair's repeated abuses and cover-ups. The enforcer in crimson's face flushed, anger mingled with panic. Linda Carmichael's tirade grew louder, but her words felt hollow against the tide of community support. The clipboard queen was unraveling, a once untouchable figure now exposed. Outside, a small crowd gathered, whispers of the battle reaching ears beyond the walls. The tyrant in heels' legacy was crumbling in real time, and everyone wanted to witness the fall. I caught sight of my daughter's face in the crowd, a quiet smile of hope, the innocent spark driving this fight. As the meeting moved into the voting phase, the tension was palpable. Ballots were cast with steady hands, voices raised in urgent discussion. Linda Carmichael paced the sidelines, a queen without her kingdom, clutching at fading power. When the votes were tallied, the announcement was electric. The board chair was removed from her position. Cheers erupted, a cathartic release from months of oppression. The clipboard queen's reign ended not with a whisper, but a roar. Linda Carmichael gathered her things, her crimson jacket now a symbol of defeat. The enforcer in Crimson's legacy was shattered, replaced by a community united in resilience. I felt a wave of relief crash over me, tempered by the knowledge that vigilance would remain our shield. In the aftermath, new leaders emerged, neighbors committed to transparency and fairness. The backdoor lock, once breached in the dead of night by the clipboard queen, became a symbol of reclaiming trust. We installed new security systems, community agreements that respected boundaries, and policies crafted by the people, for the people. The tyrant in heels was gone, but the scars she left served as a reminder. Power without accountability invites resistance. My daughter's alarm system, triggered by fear and innocence, had sounded a call that echoed far beyond our home. Looking back, I realized this wasn't just a battle over locks and rules. It was a fight for dignity, safety, and respect in a community that deserved better. The community hall buzzed with restless energy as neighbors filled every seat, their faces tight with anticipation. Linda Carmichael, the tyrant in heels, entered last, her crimson jacket a glaring banner of defiance. The clipboard queen scanned the crowd, trying to summon her usual smugness, but the atmosphere was charged with something new, collective resolve. The board chair took the stage, microphone in hand, her voice sharp but shaky. "I'm here to address the concerns raised," she began, but murmurs drowned her out. The enforcer in Crimson's reign had fractured trust beyond repair, and this was the moment the neighborhood demanded answers. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of every eye. My daughter clutched my hand tightly, a silent anchor amidst the storm. "This isn't just about broken rules," I said, voice steady but burning with urgency. "It's about safety, about respect, about the night my daughter was terrified because the clipboard queen thought she could break into our home." Linda Carmichael's face hardened, but she said nothing, letting the silence speak volumes. The tyrant in heels was losing her audience, her power slipping away with every word I spoke. Mark Delaney, the conflicted ally, rose next. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes held fierce conviction. "I saw what happened. I tried to stay out of it, but the truth can't be ignored any longer." His confession ignited a wave of whispers and nods. The board chair's empire was cracking from within. The community was no longer divided by fear or apathy. We were united by outrage and the need for justice. Linda Carmichael tried to interrupt, but the crowd's rising chorus drowned her out. The clipboard queen's grip was slipping like sand through her fingers. I revealed the evidence, videos, alarm logs, timestamps, all lining up against the board chair's midnight trespass. The enforcer in Crimson's carefully constructed lies collapsed under scrutiny. Neighbors gasped as the full extent of her overreach came to light. Questions poured in. Why did she think she could enter a locked home without consent? Who authorized this invasion? How long has this been going on? The tyrant in heels had no answers, only defiant silence. The tension peaked when a city inspector stepped forward, confirming that Linda Carmichael's actions violated multiple local ordinances. The clipboard queen's facade crumbled further under the weight of legal authority. Outside, media crews had gathered, their cameras ready to capture every moment. The enforcer in Crimson finally spoke, her voice defensive but strained. "I acted for the community's safety," she insisted. "We had to enforce the rules." But the crowd was unmoved. This was abuse of power disguised as duty. My daughter, small but fierce, stood beside me, her earlier fear transformed into quiet strength. "She scared me," she said simply, her words cutting deeper than any argument. The room fell silent, the raw honesty shaking the tyrant in heels to her core. Votes were called to remove Linda Carmichael from the board. The community, empowered and resolute, voted unanimously. The clipboard queen's reign was officially over, her legacy marked by betrayal and fear. As she gathered her things, her crimson jacket seemed heavier somehow, no longer a symbol of authority, but a shroud of defeat. The enforcer in Crimson left the hall without a word, her departure a somber end to months of turmoil. Relief washed over me, but I knew this victory was more than personal. It was a turning point for the whole neighborhood, a reclaiming of trust, safety, and respect. The back door lock, once a point of invasion and fear, became a symbol of resilience. New leadership emerged, neighbors stepping up to restore transparency and fairness. Policies were rewritten, security systems upgraded, and community meetings reopened with open dialogue. The tyrant in heels was gone, but the lesson remained clear. Power must always be held accountable. As the crowd dispersed, I caught sight of familiar faces, relieved, hopeful, ready for a new chapter. My daughter's hand tightened in mine, a small but fierce reminder of why this fight mattered. Linda Carmichael, the clipboard queen, the enforcer in crimson, names that once carried fear, had been stripped of their power. The community had spoken, loud and clear, and I knew, deep down, this was just the beginning of a better, safer future for all of us. The air was thick with quiet after the storm had passed. The community hall, once a battlefield, now felt like a sanctuary of hard-won peace. Linda Carmichael, the board chair, the tyrant in heels, was gone, but her shadow lingered, a reminder of what had been endured. The clipboard queen's reign of fear was over, yet the echoes of her overreach still reverberated through every corner of our neighborhood. I stood on my porch, watching the sunset spill gold across the street where my daughter played, her laughter a fragile balm after months of tension. The back door lock, once a symbol of violation, now gleamed with fresh purpose. It represented more than security. It was a testament to our resilience, a quiet monument to the fight we'd won. The enforcer in crimson had underestimated the power of a community united by justice. Linda Carmichael believed her authority was unshakable, but she hadn't counted on the determination of a father protecting his family, or the strength of neighbors who refused to be silenced. Her midnight intrusion wasn't just a trespass, it was a catalyst for change. Mark Delaney, the conflicted ally turned truth-bearer, approached me earlier today. His eyes carried the weight of his choice to stand with us, breaking free from the board chair's influence. It wasn't easy, he admitted, but sometimes doing what's right means risking everything. His words echoed the collective courage that had turned the tide. New leadership has emerged, more transparent and accountable. The community meetings are no longer tense showdowns, but forums for open dialogue. Linda Carmichael's tactics, manipulation, fear, and overreach have been replaced by collaboration and respect. The clipboard queen's voice is silenced, but the lessons she forced upon us will guide future vigilance. The backdoor alarm, once triggered by terror, now symbolizes safety. My daughter sleeps soundly again, no longer haunted by the memory of that midnight intrusion. Every beep of the security system is a reminder that our home is ours alone, protected by law, by neighbors, and by a father's unyielding resolve. Reflecting on the journey, I realize this story isn't just mine. It's the story of countless families who face unseen battles behind closed doors, where power can corrupt and fear can rule. But it's also a story of hope. Hope that with courage, community, and the right expertise, tyranny can be challenged and justice restored. Linda Carmichael, the tyrant in heels, may have tried to break us, but she only made us stronger. The clipboard queen's fall has become a rallying cry for homeowners everywhere. Stand up, speak out, and reclaim your right to safety and dignity. Wherever you're watching from, know this: no matter how small your fight feels, your voice matters. Together, we can expose abuse, challenge unfairness, and build communities where trust and respect thrive. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. Your courage inspires change. The battle isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet stand we take at our own front doors. But every stand matters, every story counts. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a calm settle over our street. The clipboard queen's era was over, and a new day was dawning, one where our neighborhood was no longer ruled by fear but by the strength of its people. Linda Carmichael's name will be remembered, not as a symbol of power, but as a warning of what happens when authority is abused, and my family's story will stand as proof that even the smallest voices can roar when backed by truth and community.